J.R. Butler, co-founder of the Shift Group, and you're listening to Merchants of Change. This is a podcast about transferring the skills and behaviors we acquire as athletes into being a professional technology salesperson. Each week, we'll introduce you to a top performer who will help us understand how they became professional merchants of change.
What's up, kid? How we doing?
What's up, JR? How's it going?
Dude, I'm pumped. We got my guy. One of the reasons I started Shift Group is on the call. Jimmy Fahey from Miro. Jim, great to see you. Thanks for joining us today, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, and congratulations on the success.
Absolutely, man. Well, you laid the groundwork, pal. We matched your story with a bunch of other guys. You've helped us talk to a few people, so we're psyched to have you. So a little bit of background, John. Jim and I have known each other for I don't want to age myself here, but like 16 years. Jim grew up in Massachusetts. He's a hockey guy. Played at CM. He was a 2-year captain. Won 4 state titles.
That's ridiculous.
Before going to Northeastern, he was a 3-time captain for the Huskies, and then he played 92 games in the NHL and finished up in Europe like my brother. So Jim, thanks for joining us, buddy. Pumped to have you.
Yeah, happy to be here. Just looking forward to kind of talking a little bit about my experiences, and hopefully it helps others kind of jump into, the work that you've done and paving the way and making that transition in a tight time frame. There's a huge need for it. And I think, there's a lot of companies out there that will certainly benefit from, the skill sets that athletes bring to corporate America.
Absolutely. So Jim, from a structure perspective, we like to talk like athletic background, and then we get into all the fun sales stuff. So, I was checking out your Hockey DB page, and I saw your senior year at Northeastern, 46 points as a D-man. What was that season like, dude? That must have been unbelievable.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, as you know, playing college hockey in New England, it's a dream come true. And, it was one of those times in your life you do what you could to get back and have another one of those. But really just, the thing that kind of rounded out was we had a great team, great leaders on that team, and a lot of folks that, really bought into, Northeastern hockey and really changing the culture there. And so it was a lot of fun, and the success is a lot that has to do with the people around you. So, Leon Hayward, Chris Lynch, all these folks, just great people. A lot of them are coaching, and Chris is a pilot for Delta now, and, great lifelong friends. And it started with those experiences in college. The success in that season, or the fun we had in that season, had to do with, like I said, changing the culture. And, I have a lot of lifelong friends from that when you share experiences. And, it was a great experience, and something, as going back to do it again would be amazing. But we have to grow up, unfortunately.
So, Jim, JR was telling me you won 4 state titles, and then you were captain in college for not just your senior year, like most people, but 3 years. Can you talk a little bit about that? That doesn't happen. I don't know if they get any level.
Yeah, so for me, it wasn't an expectation. I ended up going to Northeastern because I was their first choice. And anytime, I was looking at Beanpot schools, I, talked to Harvard, BC, BU, and really BC made choices to have somebody else be their first choice. And, that was Brooks Orpik at the time. And at BU, it was Chris Diamond, great players and everything else. And, but Northeastern was really my opportunity to be that go-to individual and kind of, help change the culture there. And Bruce Crowder, brought me in, Paul Canada, Jamie Rice, great leaders at Milton Academy and Babson as well. And so I made that choice to go there. And it was a surprise to me, to be honest with you, as we kind of, went from our freshman year to sophomore year to be asked to be an assistant captain sophomore year and a captain, junior and senior year. And I really didn't think much about it other than just, continuing to try to, lead by example. And we had a great structure though. Like I said before, we just had some great people, that were dedicated to building the program and dedicated to really winning hockey games. And, so it was just kind of right place, right time, I guess you could say, and just trying to do the right things. So.
That's incredible as a sophomore to be given that leadership title. That's like really special. And obviously like you've taken that leadership on to the next level, which we'll get in a little bit later. One thing I always like to ask defensemen, because there's like one reason and one reason only that I got to play college hockey. And it was because my D partner my junior year was Keith Yandel. So I had like 24 points. I think I had 23 second assists and 1 goal.
Yeah.
So I always love to know, like, who is your favorite D partner that you had in your career?
Oh, boy.
And why?
I had a lot of them. In college, I would say it's probably Joe Mancuso or Rich Spiller. And the reason it was Joe Mancuso, and it's hard to compete with your experience with Keith Yandel. I mean, Keith grew up in the same town as I did. Obviously, you know his family, great family. Brian, very successful as well, and both awesome hockey players. But I would have to probably say Joe would be my choice because Joe had a way of creating space out there. He was a walk-on at Northeastern, and just earned it every single day. And I played with him quite a bit, and the experience was awesome because he did his job, and he expected me to do my job. He'd hold me accountable, and he was just always there for you. He was reliable, steady, never got hurt, was there every time you needed him. So I would probably say Joe Mancuso in college.
So Jim, a lot of our listeners are student athletes, and they're all, trying to get to that level of playing professional in whatever league it is. But can you talk a little bit about your student life at Northeastern and what you were like? I don't know what it's like at Northeastern, but some schools it's hockey first and school second. So can you talk a little bit about that?
That's not the case at Northeastern. I can assure you that. And I'd go back to probably Catholic Memorial. My father and my mother were instrumental in basically putting me in a situation where, I didn't get one without the other. And so they were very, very clear. And if they were paying for school and giving me the ability to have the platform to learn and grow as an athlete and a student, that I wasn't going to be playing hockey if I wasn't on honor roll. And that was something they said really from the beginning. And so, both my mom was a nurse, worked nights. My dad was a tile guy and worked days. And so I learned work ethic from them. So that was really the thing is, coming in from CM to Northeastern, it was really instilled in me. And you got to get the grades first. If you don't do that, you can't focus on, the hockey side. And so that was a key for me. And Northeastern did a really nice job. I mean, and JR, you probably had something very similar. We had to complete X amount of hours a week in study halls. And it just, it kind of got in front of the fact that, you need your grades first. That's first and foremost. If you do that, your time on the ice is dependent on, how well you play. But without that foundation, you won't play. So I took a lot of pride in making sure I invested the time in study hall and getting honor roll through college, and really making sure that wasn't in the way of, ice time and other things.
I love, I couldn't agree more, Jim. Like the habits that I developed, and listen, I think CM's probably very similar. It's like forced habits. Like you have to get your stuff done in school. Like Cushing was a little different situation because we lived there, but they forced us to be at our desk every night, Monday through Thursday or Sunday through Thursday, 8 to 10. So I developed that habit as a 15 to 19-year-old. And even now, I find myself usually working from 8 to 10 as a natural instinct. So it's definitely makes a huge difference. And it's followed me in my regular career as well. Unfortunately, John and I never got to play professional sports. We both stopped at the college level. I'm super curious, coming from college into the pro level, especially at the level you were at, like, what were some of the habits that you developed to become, like, we'll talk about this later about being a professional salesperson, but being a pro, right? Like, what were those things that were different in college and some of the things that were the same?
Yeah, I think, as you kind of progress, what I learned really, really quickly, whether it was the hard way or just identifying, maybe some of the gaps that teams needed, was your skill sets have to change. And this, JR, every job you have, your skill sets have to change. You can't solely rely on what you learned in the past and hope that gets you, to where you want to be in the future. And so, coming out of college, you said I was, on the ice a lot, played an offensive role from the back end. And then, getting to San Jose as an 8th round draft pick and looking at, a lineup that had, Mike Rathje, Brad Stewart, Scott Hannon, a bunch of Brian Marchment, obviously just passed. They didn't really need somebody that was, hanging on to the puck for too long or trying to do too much on the front end. What they needed was, somebody that could fill a role and just be reliable. And so one of the things that I learned early on is just identify the gaps. Like, what is it that, in your new role that needs to be, changed from maybe a weakness or an opportunity to a strength, right? And when you identify those things, really that's, those are the things that you need to focus on, the things that become priorities, and working on your game in that way. And so for me, that was critical. I was fortunate enough at San Jose, and unfortunately for Brad Stewart, if you remember back in 2002, he got a concussion. San Jose was picked to win the Stanley Cup, and Brad got a concussion. And that really gave me the opportunity to make an impact on the power play, but I had to earn that. With Daryl Sutter being your coach, you weren't just going to kind of walk in and get on the power play. That wasn't how it worked. And so they made some trades, brought in a couple people, and what I identified as the gap is like, you need to make an impact. So I started to, meet with Chris Nyland and learn how to fight a little bit and do some of those things. And so, and not that I was going to, at 6'1.5" and 210 pounds, make a huge impact, but just the willingness to fill those gaps and the willingness to play any role to make the team, was something that I learned early on in any job is, identify why you're there and then focus on those priorities to make the team stronger.
So you mentioned, Jim, a lot of legendary names right there, and mentorship is big in this podcast. It comes up a lot, whether it's in sales or hockey or athletics. But can you talk a little bit about some of the mentorship aspects of your early days in hockey?
Yeah, looking back, John, it's interesting. Like, and JR, like we saw this when we started to work together when I was at EMC and you were at ICI. There's a lot of great people that have done the work and laid the foundation for us to be able to be successful. And as I look back, I think of people like Jamie Shepard, who, like, even when I messed something up for a customer at EMC, Jamie was one of those people that say, hey, don't worry about it, we'll fix it. And, there are other people, as I go back and to your question around hockey, that as I reflect on that, I think one of the people that made the biggest impact on my career, was Brian Marchment. And obviously I said, like, he just recently passed at 53. It was awful. But Mosh was one of those people that, really took me under his wing and showed me that, mistakes are going to happen, right? Like, what do you do next? Like, you just don't make the same mistake twice. If you're going to do something, do it as hard and as fast and with all your energy that you have. Another name I would say is Adam Graves. Gravy would take us on dinner on road trips. And, obviously I grew up and finally had a few dollars in my wallet and I wanted to pay for the meal. I've never seen an individual more upset with me trying to pay, or another young player trying to pay for a meal. He was not going to have it. And that was his way of saying, like, hey, listen, I earned this. And, you need to understand, like, that there's a pecking order here. So I would say Adam Graves, Brian Marchment. I ended up living with Kyle McLaren for quite some time on the road. He was another one that really kind of took me under his wing and showed me, what a young player in the NHL was and how to kind of, go about your business and do your job and, not be too loud. Don't attract too much attention. But there were a lot. I mean, Joe Thornton, Scott Hannon used to let me live in his house in San Jose. Joe Thornton was another one that we were the same age. I think I was actually 3 months older than him. And speaking of that, John, his beard is probably the only one that rivals yours right now. But
Yeah.
but I, just another great person that we had a lot in common. He obviously started in Boston, and we knew a lot of the same people. And so, he was another individual that kind of, took me under his wing, and just it kind of gave me the space that I needed to be part of something special. And I think that's, that's probably the mentors I would look at. I mean, I can't stress enough that, there's a ton of people, Danny McGillis, I could keep going on individuals that had impacts, but mentorship's huge.
It's so crazy to me how the lessons you learned in college and your pro career, and the same thing for me, how they translate into the working world, right? Talking about finding your role, getting over mistakes, right? Ted Lasso, be a goldfish, right? And even senior guys stepping up and paying for dinner. It seems like a little thing, but you end up doing that when you get older, right? I remember Shep didn't let me pay for anything my first 3 years at ICI. And then when I got over to Turbo into leadership, when I went out with younger sellers, it was always I was picking up the tab every time, and I know they appreciated that. So those are things that showed up in your working life, that's probably a good time to transition. So that's when, Jim, you and I met. I'm pretty sure I was in Franklin the day you interviewed with Jimmy Mack. And I remember hearing oh, Jimmy Fahey's here. And I obviously I know who you were growing up in Boston playing hockey. And I was that's so badass. But you stepped into an SA role, a sales associate role, right? You went from, jets and flying all over Europe to cold calling. How jarring was that lifestyle change for you? We have a lot of kids going through that right now. And I'm just super curious to hear what it was like from your perspective.
How much time do you have? Yeah, it was quite an experience. And we at the same time you have your home life, right? So we were having our second child, and starting a new career, and that career involved over 100 dials a day and a 55 constitution at EMC. But really, I think it was a blessing to have that opportunity. The people that opened the doors for you to be able. I signed a 2-year deal to go back to Nuremberg and play, and I had met with Billy Scannell. And he basically opened the door for me to have the opportunity to earn a job there. And that's why I went to see Jimmy Mack, because I was if I'm gonna close the doors on hockey, I need to make sure that I know who I'm working for and what I need to do. And I had done a lot of investigation on sales and that goal orientated, continuing to hit your marks that you mentioned, JR. Learning to fall down, fail fast, make those corrections, iterate, learn, and grow. And so when I met with Jimmy Mack, I just wanted to make sure that this was the right team for me, the right spot for me. And I actually, I had made a call 2 days early to Doug Wilson, who was the assistant GM to Dean Lombardi in San Jose, just to make sure the doors in the NHL had closed, because there was no looking back when I pulled into 55 Constitution in my 3-year-old Infiniti, because we needed to buy a second car. And so, pulling up there was an experience. I mean, you're there with a ton of super sharp, young, go-getters that have kind of spent the last 4 to 5 years in school just thinking about their sales career and learning and really investing the time. And so I was a bit of an anomaly, if you will, coming in, and here's this 30-year-old guy that's, having to get back in the classroom and learn all over again in a new way. But, again, met some great people, and they learned a lot from me, and I learned a ton from them. And it was all about competing. So I just focused on the task at hand more so than, the surroundings and being caught in a queue.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's like no one better to start your career under than Jimmy Mack. Candidly, Jimmy, I don't know if you noticed it, but the name of the podcast is Merchants of Change, which is a Jimmy Mack euphemism, right? Like that's why we named it this. That's unreal. Billy, were you like thinking sales from the get, or was it like a meeting with Billy that was like, that's why I want to do sales? Like, why'd you choose sales out of everything you could have done?
Yeah. So I ended up exploring a couple different opportunities. So, Jimmy Madigan, who at the time was, working at Northeastern, became pretty friendly with him. He became friendly with my family. And I really leaned on him because he had a lot of experience in business, but also in professional hockey, right? As a professional scout, and then the dean of endowment at Northeastern, and, head coach, athletic director. And so I looked at coaching, and to be honest with you, like after, spending 8+ years in hockey, I didn't really feel the passion to get back into coaching. And that's changed. I coach my kids now. But the passion wasn't there, and I needed to be able to get back to earning in a quick way, and going to try to be a doctor or a lawyer was out of the question. And so Jimmy Madigan kind of set me up with executives that he knew through his Northeastern connections at IBM and EMC. And I went down to visit with Billy Scannell and had a meeting with him. And the interview went from 30 minutes to 2.5 hours. And he pushed back a flight that he was taking to San Fran. And I was like, whoa, like talk about a commitment. We had a lot in common. His dad, my grandfather, worked in the same place at Edison back in the day. And really just like he gave me the opportunity. So, what I realized is like the same type of people we talked about in hockey, like those that sacrifice, those that do the simple things. They're the same leaders that are in sales, right? They value teamwork. They value execution. They value hard work. They value coaching and curiosity. And so that it was almost decided for me where I could have built a career in this if I just do the same things, learn again, invest the time, make the right sacrifices. And it just was the right fit because, it's very similar. And that's why I think what you guys are doing is awesome around, or JR around, Shift, is there's such a need for those driven people that know how to succeed and fail fast in the world of, tech sales and sales in general.
Can you talk, Jim? I want to pick on that a little bit because a ton of our listeners and candidates at Shift are coaching. Like, a lot of former athletes, they get into either coaching or working at fitness centers or gyms, and they try to keep the athletic dream alive, if you will. And can you talk a little bit about the difference between, I'm sure coaching is very lucrative, but the opportunity to earn in sales, that's what a lot of athletes are wondering about.
So one of Billy's sales tactics was he grabbed this, it was probably like 4 inches thick. And it was, computer paper, spreadsheet type of, Excel spreadsheet that had every single sales rep at EMC at the time and their earnings. And he plopped it on the table in front of me and he said to me, he's like, hey, I'm not saying you're going to be in the front page of this book or the back page of this book. But as far as a career and you being able to provide for your family and you being able to provide for others, create opportunity. I'm a big Bill Russell fan. If you look at Bill Russell, he never talked about how he played. He always talked about how his play made the team better, or like how other people kind of made him better. And, for me, that booklet, I'll never forget that dropping on the table. It was heavy as heck. And kind of going through it and just kind of understanding like, man, it's up to you what you make of this. Whether you're the last page or the first page, it's the same thing as being in athletics. You want to stop playing as a mighty might, or do you want to stop playing as as somebody that makes the highest levels in the world? And so, the opportunity to earn a lot is there, and it is all dependent on the effort you put in, and where you're willing to put yourself out there to learn and grow.
What advice, Jim, would you give to the candidates we're working with that are making that transition you made back in that that last phone call to San Jose and the drive down, 495 to Constitution Boulevard. Like, what if you could go back? Like, what's one thing that you would like say? Hey, make sure you think of this, or take this perspective, or develop this habit. Like, what's your biggest piece of guidance for those folks that are going through the same transition you went through years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think like putting yourself out there, and as JR, you alluded to before, like the people you meet along the way, the mentors you had in athletics, like they want to help you. Like I want to help people that you're bringing in, JR. Like I want to see these people be successful, and that's just innately like that's a human characteristic for good people like to have. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. The other thing I would say is like change can be scary for people, and it comes at different levels. Go at it as fast as possible. Like, I mean, I remember in inside sales, like there was a woman that sat next to me, and she got off a call, and she was super smart. She got off a cold call, and she was crying because somebody yelled at her. And so I was just like, you know what? Like, why not call this person back? Let's just call them back and make sure like they leave with EMC being like, obviously we got them at a bad time, whatever. And so like that was, I mean, I was scared inside, but I was like, you know what? We're going to let this fly and see what happens. So I would just say, charge at change fast. Like try different things, fail fast, invest the time to learn. Like don't, jump ship. And that's why I think, shift is such an awesome opportunity. Like get in, learn from others, build that kind of, camaraderie around you and people with the same experiences, but hit change fast.
100%. Well said, dude. That was awesome. You, Jim, like I was there, right? You went from that SA role to a quota carrying role pretty quickly. I think, partially it was the timing of EMC doing that resegmentation, right, with the inside sales. But I think a lot of it, like we deal with a lot of kids that are more mature. They've done another job. They've been a teacher. They sold insurance. They did other things. But even the kids that come right out of school, they all want to get to a closing role as fast as possible. What do you think? It's kind of two questions. What's the best way to get off to a fast start beyond what you just talked about? Because I think that's a huge piece of it. And then like, what are the areas of development for this? Like you're now in sales leadership. You've hired a ton of salespeople. Like, what are the areas of development that new salespeople need to lean into more? So it's kind of a two-part question. Best way to get into a closing role, and the areas of development you should most focus on when you first start in sales.
Yeah. So I think for me, the best way to get into a closing role and kind of, elevate your career is like, I always talk about sacrifice. And so you're going to get the curriculum if you start in the right places or you work with a group like yourself. You're going to understand that, but it's what you do when the doors close and nobody's looking, right? Invest the time to learn, read about like, the characteristics, traits, skills that you need to do the job appropriately. And it's not just the job you're doing, it's the job you want. So don't stop setting those goals, set those goals and keep the timelines tight. I always look at things 0 to 6 months, 6 to 12, 12 to 18, and then beyond. And put something quantifiable around those goals. So there's a time frame you want to get to the point next, and then understand what the pay is. Do you go from 50 to 100? Do you go from 75 to 100? And then keep yourself like on those tracks to say like, these are the goals I want to get to and what I want to be earning. So I think if you continue to just that behavior around setting goals and attaining them is the fastest way to get there. As far as like the second part of that question, JR, like, I talk about sacrifice. I think like, I mean the focus. You can't do everything. And so just, making sure that like, when you get there, you're focused on the things that you can be great at, meaning like, if it's presentation skills, if it's qualification, discovery frameworks, leading with empathy, really just kind of focus on those learnings And, I mean, for me, again, I always go back to like when I think about the past and reflect, people that made an impact. I mean, Trevor Bobwick, as you know, and I spoke to him this morning, again, it was somebody that like he went through this learning process in a different way at a different time. I picked his brain daily. I mean, I would go buy him a beer and we'd sit there and talk about the things that he did to be successful at that next job. So always thinking ahead. It's kind of a curse at the same time because you can't really enjoy what you're doing as much as you would be able to, but it's how you get through it the fastest and be successful at those different levels.
That's really solid, Jim. And can you talk a little bit about your leadership roles? You're in one right now. Can you talk about what you have the biggest impact on in your organization and what you think you're, striving for each time? And talk just about
I'm a big believer in leading by example. Like I tell people all the time, like, I'm going to make more mistakes than you will. That gives you the right to fail fast. And like, I won't make the same mistake twice. And then I think the simplification is important. This is not rocket science. Like people buy from people and they have to know their brief. They have to be approachable. They have to listen. They have to have a work ethic. So they're trustworthy. But really like just prioritizing those simple things and then filling in the gaps with like, just that learning. I mean, for me, I've followed the people that have helped me along the way. And so I'm just trying to emulate what I've learned from those leaders. And I think simplification, especially in SaaS, like everybody thinks you need to be everything to everybody. But actually, if you just narrow your focus to the places that you can make an impact with the personas that you can impact, you get a lot of value out of the relationship and out of what you mean to their organization and the outcomes you can drive with whatever you're selling.
Keep it simple, stupid, right? Like same thing that my dad said to me before every
Mine
hockey
was my
game,
mother.
like literally. It works. Like if you can do that, have focus and execute against what you're really good at, it's a game changer. I remember, Jim, going from being a leader of a team to being a leader of leaders, and hiring new leaders was something that I made a lot of, like to your point about making mistakes, like your tendency when you're first hiring leaders to lead teams that are underneath you, at least for me, was I'm going to look for the best individual contributor and I'm going to make them a manager. And it was huge. It was a huge mistake. And I think we both, both me and the manager were like, hey, maybe this wasn't the right move. Like we got to look at it differently. Can you talk a little bit now that you're in like and you've been in more of a leader of leaders type of role? What do you look for when you are trying to identify like people that are individual contributors that you want to make leaders? Like what are the things that you look for in those new leaders of people?
Yeah, I mean, we've all made those mistakes, JR. I've made them multiple times. I think for me, I look for a couple different things. I want to see people that are passionate about success. Passion can kind of hide a lot of different, challenges along the way. And I want somebody that's going to bring the same approach to other people's success. And they have to have a passion, and it has to be around coaching. I don't need people that can read spreadsheets. I need people that want people to get better, can identify gaps, and can coach those individuals to be better. I think the other thing for me that's really important is like curiosity. People that want to get to that next level and show people how to do it. Like, it's not the first level question, getting an answer. It's like, all right, now unpack that for me. Like dig deeper into that. Like that level of curiosity just shows me that they'll invest the time with customers and with, the people that they're coaching, the people that they're leading. And, in this world, things are changing so quickly. So that, curiosity is just keeps them ahead of the curve in my mind. And then I think the other thing, and I alluded to it before, is teamwork. Like I want to understand, what they feel their their role is. If they think their role as a leader is to orchestrate, you go this way or that way, not for our organization. Like, what impact can you make on this team, and how are you going to make this team better? Like a force multiplier. Those are some of the things. Other things like, people that are self-starters, right? How have you talk about an obstacle that you had in your life? What did you do to change your approach? And then what is something that you've done difficult that you started on your own? And I'm looking there for impact. I'm looking for impact in those discussions.
I always used to say to my new leaders, I need, because you come in, especially when Turbo was really a rocket ship, we were moving a lot of like 24, 25-year-old kids into management roles. And they think, to your point, they think their job is to tell people what to do. And the thing I always used to say to them is like, listen, you now work for your 7 sales reps. Your job, you have one job and one job only, and it's to make them successful. Their job is not to make you successful. Your job is to make them successful. And if you come with that mindset into a leadership role, I think you're going to manage people differently. You're going to talk to them differently. And you're just going to think about like how you fit into the team in a different way. And I think those people that pick that up quickly are wildly successful.
And people will want to work for them no matter where they go. And it's it really just, it builds that culture. And you never worry about those individuals when you close the door behind you, like, because you always know that like that they're kind of bringing the right culture, they're bringing the right character to the situation.
100%. That's awesome. So I think we're getting to here now to the last 2 questions. Every seller, and I know like my answer to this, has one skill that they've developed that really makes them elite. Obviously, Jim, getting to the leadership level you've gotten to, you were a great seller as well. What was like your number one skill that made you an elite seller?
It's a great question. For me, this is going to kind of be a cop-out to some extent. I'd have to say time management. I think, you can always look at like, pure skills, negotiation, presentation, all of that. But for me, I think, back to the keep it simple, stupid, you need to be able to say no to things. And you need to prioritize the critical, right? Not everything needs to get done today. And I think, making those sacrifices, and it can be a curse, right? Like having a young family, starting a new career and trying to do it as fast as possible. And this, JR, like you have to sacrifice things. You have to have a great partner with you to say like, man, I'm going to do this and be very clear on your targets. And I need help. I need you to help me here. And so having that at time management and really prioritizing the things that are important to you to get to those levels to provide for your family, I think for me is probably the thing that's made the most impact.
It's so true that as a salesperson, the only resource you can't create more of is time. And young sellers have a major tendency to waste their time in opportunities with people on accounts that they're never going to buy. Yeah. Right. And like, I think it takes some, unfortunately, it takes some scars to like really learn your lesson there and go, you know what, I'm going to move on from this. I'm not going to talk about this deal in every single QBR for the next, 2 years, which, sometimes I would let reps continue to talk about deals. I would never talk about those deals to my leaders because I knew they were never going to close. And I just needed the rep to learn themselves.
And this, right? There's been many vacations where you're sitting in a room trying to close a deal at the end of the quarter. And, when you reflect and kind of think about that deal, you're like, man, if I just asked the executive buyer 2 weeks before if it was possible to do this, and I mean in many ways, not, hey, my expectation is this gets done this month. No, like I am setting expectations that we're doing this partnership this month. Like, we aligned in that? And it's just having that courage to do that earlier. And then, it gives you the time to go invest in something else, right? And that can be your career, your family, learning and growing, all of those things. And I think it's critical for people to have the courage to say no and say, you know what, like I buy the book, qualification, med pick, all this stuff. This is not going to come in. And you have to be honest with yourself.
You took the words out of my mouth. Courage. I was going to say confidence. It takes a little bit of courage to be like, hey, I don't have time for this. Like,
and owning it and learning
think
from
about
it.
anybody else but your time, because you don't get it back.
Absolutely.
That's
so,
huge.
Jim, you'll love this one. So, my dad used to say to us when we were little, you know, hey, a lot of kids play hockey, but there's not a lot of hockey players, right? And you know, he was kind of embedding in us early, basically being a pro, like taking everything and approaching everything in a way where you're not just playing hockey, you're a hockey player. You're prepared, you know, you're getting rest, you're practicing, you understand the competition, all those things. And we think that the highest praise you can give a salesperson is calling them a pro. Like this guy, this girl is a pro. For you, what are the things that you meet a sales rep or you have a sales rep that works for you? What makes them a sales professional? What makes them a pro?
Yeah, I think the first thing is they know their brief, as Billy Scanlon used to say. They know what they're talking about. They are dedicated to become an expert in that field, the subject matter expert, whatever you want to call them, but they know what they're doing, right? They play at the top of the game, no matter what the sport is, the instrument they play, or the job they have. I think the second thing is, and I'd go back to it, is just leading by example. You can just see behind every professional, or somebody that I would call a professional, they lead by example. There's a group of people behind them that is learning from that individual, right? That next level of leadership, that next level of individual contributor, you know, they're the ones that are wanting to go to dinner with the Adam Graves or Brian Marchments of the world. And they're learning from those individuals. So the influence is there. They're making a big influence. So I think they play at the top of the game. They lead by example, and you can see the force multiplier in the influence they have in an organization. That, to me, is a pro.
It's so true, because it doesn't even they don't even have to have captain or manager or director titles. Like, some of my best leaders were sales reps that just did the right thing. They got very positive outcomes. A lot of that time, that was commission checks. And everybody else saw them and said, you know what? I'm going to do what she's doing. She's killing it. You know, she's coming in with a new bag every week. Like, that's who I want to mirror. So I love that. That's a really good way to describe it. That's the first time we've heard that one. Jim, unreal conversation. So many great nuggets in here. I know our guys and girls are going to really appreciate listening to this. And this one's one that I'm going to force as part of our training. So thank you so much.
I think this is great. I mean, I think what you're doing with Shift JR is awesome. I mean, there's such a need out there. I'm on both sides of it now. I know, at Miro, we introduced you to the head of recruitment. There's just such a big impact that these folks can have in a tight time frame. And I think it's a great career. You know it. John is the same. And I just think there's such a need for this in SaaS and in technology and all of sales. And so I think, if I can be of a help in any way, let me know how I can help.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you.
Take care.
Thanks, Jim.
This wraps up this episode of Merchants of Change. If you enjoyed this episode, the most meaningful way to say thanks is to submit a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in working with us, please come find us at www.shiftgroup.io.